This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
This message comes from PNC Bank, who believes some things in life should be boring, like banking, because boring is steady, pragmatic, responsible. You don't want your bank to be exciting. Exciting is for setting trends, not banks. That's why PNC Bank strives to be boring with your money, so you can be happily fulfilled with your life. PNC Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865. Brilliantly boring is a service mark of the PNC Financial Services Group, Inc., PNC Bank, National Association, member FDIC.
Welcome to People Tech, the podcast of WorkforceAI.news. I'm Mark Pfeffer. Let's take a step back today and look at how HR is taking advantage of or gearing up for AI. I'm joined by Siobhan Fagan, the editor-in-chief of Reworked. We're going to talk about what's real and what's not, how the workforce will adapt, where AI fits into HR, and where HR fits into AI. That and more on this edition of People Tech. Siobhan, thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Great to talk with you. Let's talk about AI and HR, not surprisingly. It seems like in the HR space, there's a lot of hype going on from vendors and consultants about all of the wonderful things that AI is going to be able to do for HR. If you think about the hype of AI versus the reality of AI, how do those things align?
Well, I would say that the hype is not relegated only to the HR space.
Right.
The AI conversation has basically sucked all of the air out of the room so that people are fundamentally approaching this from a tech first question rather than what solutions, like what problems are we trying to solve? So it's the old hammer and nail issue. Where it's the hammer in search of the nails. So I think that that's kind of going across the board and not only specific to HR. As we're nearing the end of the year and we are hearing more and more about agentic AI, I think that that is a space now where we are hearing a lot of promises and not necessarily much by way of delivery. And I'm assuming your audience knows what is meant by agentic AI, although there does not seem to be a common definition. But basically, we're talking about those autonomous AI bots that are able to work through entire processes, sometimes in coordination with other AI bots, to solve complex problems with very little, if any, human oversight. And so that's what we're currently being promised. And we still are sort of in wait and see mode there.
You know, it seems to me that throughout the organization, there's an awful lot of energy being spent on exploring AI, trying it out, implementing it, coming up with use cases and all of that kind of thing. Do you think that's true, that it's getting an inordinate amount of attention? And is that getting in the way, first, of business in general, but secondly, is getting in the way of HR doing its basic job?
That's an interesting question. I do think that, to your first point, the hype is definitely getting in the way, because I think what it's doing is creating a sense of FOMO, where people are scrambling to keep up with what is going on and not necessarily understanding what the realistic things are. So if you look at, for example, the promises of AI in recruiting, which is obviously one of the big use cases that people are using, and you are told that it will simplify and it will streamline and it will, help you solve all of your problems. But the companies that are doing it well are using it as a assistant more than a fully autonomous agent. They are using it in areas like for a chatbot. I spoke with somebody at a major hospital the other day who is using an AI chatbot, and it basically streamlined their recruiting process by getting all of these nurses and other people who were wanting to apply to the hospital system to the right jobs quickly, which was something that wasn't happening earlier. And that was just like this very small, very specific use case where they saw real results. And I think that we need more case studies like that, rather than these overblown promises of what it can do and where it's going to be seen.
Well, it does seem like there's a lot of money going into all of this, that companies are making a big investment in terms of time and dollars. Did you think the money that they're spending is well spent, or are they just kind of throwing dollars at something and hoping they can find a value to it?
That's a tough one. I can't speak to anybody's budgeting process. I do think that there is a need for companies to be experimenting with, to be finding good solutions, practical solutions of AI in their stacks. And I think that since they have already invested in so many of these tools already, they're already in place and their existing vendors are introducing this AI, then absolutely play with it, absolutely continue using it. When we look at something, though, like ChatGPT's $200 subscription that they announced last week, when we're looking at that kind of outlay on top of what is already a fairly considerable amount of spending per person per month, is that practical? I would want to see more results before I would suggest anybody throw that money down.
Do you think companies are going to be running to do it anyway, just because it's sort of the cool thing to do?
I'm sure some will. Yeah, absolutely. But I do think that right now, the real use cases, the practical use cases that are helping people do their jobs better, as opposed to the speculative, is where people should be putting their money. And if possible, when they do get those practical use cases running, then having that sandbox on the side where they can experiment and they can find these perhaps moonshot chances where it will work in a more innovative way.
In reading and following things about AI and HR, hear a lot from CHROs, hear a lot from CIOs, hear a lot from HR directors, but I don't hear a lot from the practitioners. What are the people who are just kind of frontline HR staff? What are they thinking about all this?
I think in a lot of cases, they're trying to balance, and it's the role of HR in general. They're trying to balance these push and pull between their senior leaders who are eager to find out how AI can create these efficiencies, can create this optimization that we've all been promised, while at the same time having to handle the pressure from below, where employees are both interested in, curious of, and using AI, but at the same time scared of being replaced, and in some cases are needing to be upskilled. And so I think the HR people are in a tough position between the two, but that's sort of the balancing act that they do in their roles every day.
Hey, Atlanta, say hello to Small Business Help from Apple. That's right. We're here to make starting and running your business simpler. From helping you choose the right devices to setting them up hassle-free, we can help you build your business in no time. Speak to a business expert and get the help you need at no cost whatsoever. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/smallbusiness or visit an Apple store to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by AWS. Amazon Q Business is the new generative AI assistant from AWS. Many tasks can make business slow, like wading through mud. Help! Luckily, there's a faster, easier, less messy choice. Amazon Q can securely understand your business data to help you streamline tasks, like summarizing quarterly results or doing complex analyses in no time. Q got this. Learn what Amazon Q Business can do for you at aws.com/learn more.
Let me ask you about AI's impact on HR. We hear a lot about, AI improves efficiency, lets people spend more time on strategic issues rather than workaday issues. Is AI materially changing the way HR works, do you think?
Not on any broad scale yet. I think there are pockets. I think there are success stories. I can think of one in the form of MasterCard, who was an early adopter of AI in their internal talent marketplace. And they were using the AI in that case to connect employees with potential part-time work, potential mentors, and all sorts of other things. And in that case, it was quite successful, and it was a very specific use case. But I don't think that we are seeing the efficiencies yet at any scale. And I think that there's a fundamental talent gap, both in the employees, but also in the HR field, where we all need to be upskilled. We all need to have that understanding specifically of when to use AI and when not to use AI, and what practical use cases will deliver the most value.
Well, I hear a lot about that, people needing to be upskilled in order to make the best use of AI. And I wonder about, for example, people like us. We're both journalists. We both spend a lot of time thinking about AI. But what kind of upskilling do I need, for example?
That's a great question. I mean, there's the use case of a specific tool. So if you're introducing a specific tool in your company, then the person needs to very, very specifically be upskilled on that. I think on a broader sense, it is more the sort of sandbox, what I was talking about before, where people have that safe place where they feel comfortable exploring, experimenting with, and also have a place where they can actually ask questions where they don't feel stupid. And I think that that's actually a really important part of it, because everybody's learning at different paces. And we all learn better when we're actually comfortable sharing our success stories and our failures together.
Do you think that HR is providing any kind of, I guess, test case? HR is funny because its impact is felt throughout the organization. It's not like sales, who worry about sales, or development, who worry about development. HR is kind of everywhere. It would seem to me that that makes a good place for companies to start with AI. Do you think companies are doing that, or are they just sort of everyone's picking their own way in?
Yeah, I don't see HR being the testing ground necessarily. Not that companies aren't introducing it in HR, but as being like the starting place for a company, in part because it's a little bit more fraught than other use cases. So if you're looking at AI, say, for document management, and it's for search, in that case, you are working within this contained thing. You are in your own environment within the enterprise, and the results are actually codified. HR, because of its reach throughout the workplace, and because it's dealing with humans, it has that extra layer of complexity that I think makes it a more challenging case scenario than in other areas. So that's kind of where I see it. I do think that there are a lot of different areas where it can be applied, where it's sort of the lower level, like the chatbot that I mentioned earlier. But I think that it's complicated, and I think it also involves some fundamental rethinking of jobs, breaking down tasks, and other work that has to go on externally before you can introduce the AI.
It does seem like there's this ground shifting going on where AI is making the technology smarter or more responsive, let's say. Um, there's more integration going on where employees might access their HR system through Slack, say, or Teams. Um, People are relying more and more on chatbots as a way to interact with the technology. Those are three pretty big changes in the tech world. And do you see the same thing? And if you do, where do you think that's all going?
I think part of that is, and yes, I do see that. And I think part of that is a direct response to the proliferation of tools that we've seen in the workplace over the last 3 or 4 years. And I think that what happened was companies very successfully made that transition to working remotely, which was fantastic, but due to the time constraints, didn't necessarily have the governance in place for the rollout of all those tools. And what we're seeing now is the overlap of a lot of tools, the excess of tools where people don't necessarily know where they should be, sharing a document. And so they share it in 5 places at once. They don't know where they should be communicating with their team at any given time. So that kind of integration, I think we'll see more of, but I think that at the same time where AI could be potentially helping is identifying those overlaps, identifying where those tools can be streamlined, and identifying how to get rid of those redundancies.
I keep hearing the same thing about where HR is being used. It's being used to increase efficiency. It's being used to streamline communications by drafting job descriptions or what have you. It makes me wonder where else should these talents, if you will, but where else should these capabilities be applied? It seems like there's more to AI than sifting through job applications or writing job descriptions or all of that. Is there a place where it should be used that it's not being used yet?
I can't speak to not being used. I do think that the MasterCard example that I shared earlier, with the personalized learning journeys that they're providing their employees, is a very compelling use case. I think that being able to better personalize the employee journey. So you are starting to see these larger platforms. I'm thinking of SAP SuccessFactors or Workday rolling out these sort of entire platforms that are going to bring you along the entire employee journey and showing these capabilities throughout so that it becomes more seamless. That shows great promise. I can't speak to whether it's delivering yet, but it shows great promise. But anything that is going to better reduce the friction for employees in their day-to-day work is someplace where I think that HR should be focusing. And I also think that anything that they can be doing to better identify the skill sets of their employees, and that is an area where AI can help, will be good, because I think that's where jobs are going to be moving in the future. And we've been hearing about skills-based hiring for ages, but we haven't really seen it come true. But I do think that with AI's automation capabilities, jobs will be broken down into more distinct, discrete parts. And so identifying those specific skills of people and where they can be applied and how they can actually not only broaden, but also apply their skills in other areas is going to be very important.
Do you think the capabilities of AI are going to encourage executives to look at HR in a different way? Meaning, looking for different ways that HR can bring value to the business, or different ways that it's contributing in some way, shape, or form to the business financials and the bottom line. Is it setting things up for that big of a landscape shift?
Is I hope so a good answer?
Sure.
I mean, that's what I think. I hope so. Uh, but we've been hearing about HR's seat at the proverbial table for years now, and it keeps kind of manifesting and then being taken away and manifesting and being taken away. So
Yeah, I keep thinking that we're in a period that's a lot like it was, say, 6 or 7 years ago when data was the big thing. And everybody was writing articles about how if you were going to be in HR, you really had to know data. You didn't have to quite be a data scientist, but you had to have a lot of knowledge about how to use data. I'm not sure that that really came true to the extent some people said it would. But I'm wondering, is this a similar kind of setup where the technology is really going to drive a lot of decisions like who gets hired in HR or how does the strategy get executed in HR? Is it going to really change the environment for HR?
I think it will change the environment for HR. But I don't know that it's comparable to the data example, in part because the data is a specific skill set that you could hire for, and you could have somebody on your team who could handle that data analysis. The difference with generative AI, in my opinion, is that it's going to permeate every aspect of the business, and it's also going to fundamentally change how we work if it lives up to its promise. And when we think about fundamentally changing how we work, that's where HR needs to be involved. So it's not just that they need to have those skills in AI and the ability. I think they need a basic understanding, and I think they need to, as much as possible, use their imagination about how it can potentially improve work. But I think that it's also where they really need to double down on what it is that they do best, which is understanding people, understanding organizational development, and leaning in and strengthening those areas.
Now, if you were a CHRO or if you were asked by a CHRO to sketch out the best way to handle all of this, the change that AI is bringing to HR, the advance of technology in general, the workplace and the way people approach work is changing. It's a lot going on for an executive to try to keep track of and manage. What does CHROs think of all of this right now?
But I can give you anecdotal things, but CHROs as a whole, I don't know that there is some kind of unanimous feeling. One thing that I do think has been manifesting repeatedly, and this is even before generative AI, is that CHROs cannot be working in isolation, that they need to be working in cross collaboration with their colleagues across multiple departments, and that it's only through that kind of collaborative work that where to use AI, where to use any tool, how to design the workplace is going to become clearer because it can't be working in isolation anymore.
I guess my last question is really kind of general and maybe even a little vague, but when you look at all the things that are going on, um, AI, advanced technology, changes in the workplace, where do you think it's all going? I mean, is this going to really change work, or is this just basically new tools and new technology being applied to the same old things?
It's a good question. It's one that I ask myself frequently. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I do think that the level of hype right now is not helpful. But I do think given the amount of investment in these tools, we're going to see businesses continue to try and find that work, find that success case. And when I say businesses, I mean the vendors, so that they can actually justify the investment that they've done. Will it change workplaces? I imagine yes. Will it change how we work? I do see that jobs will probably have to be reimagined to a certain extent, in that they will have to, if only to support the automation, be broken down into more discrete areas, like I said before. The level of it, I don't know. When we'll get there, I don't know. I mean, artificial general intelligence is something that I find hard to believe that we're there imminently, as Sam Altman says. But it's very difficult. And I think that the most helpful thing right now, rather than sort of speculating where we're going to be a few years down the line, is focusing on separating those helpful use cases out from the hype, sharing the success stories, sharing the failures. I find that a lot of companies will talk off the record about their attempts and how they have not come through, but will not necessarily speak on the record. So I think we need to not only hear about those success stories, which definitely exist, but also about those cases where it's not necessarily delivering, so that people can have perhaps a little bit more calmness, a little bit less FOMO, so that they can approach it with a clear mind and hopefully be able to find some value.
Thank you very much. It was great to talk with you, and it's an interesting collection of topics, I think.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope this is helpful, and I hope that I didn't say I don't know too much.
My guest today has been Siobhan Fagan, the editor-in-chief of Reworked.co. And this has been People Tech, the podcast of WorkforceAI.news. We're a part of the Work Defined podcast network. Find them at www.wrkdefined.com. And to keep up with AI technology and HR, subscribe to Workforce AI today. We're the most trusted source of news in the HR tech industry. Find us at www.workforceai.news. I'm Mark Pfeffer.